A few years ago when I was 11, a girl, and my brother was 6, a new person started being seen in the neighborhood. I know in most places that's not a big deal, but we live in a really small town. Everyone knows everyone else, and all the kids play together even though we're all different age groups. Nobody had seen this guy before. He was probably around 40, had long ratty hair, a scruffy face, and an old dirty jacket. Nothing weird happened, but it was just strange that nobody had seen him before. A few weeks went by, and at least once every other day, I and my friends would see him somewhere just walking around the neighborhood while we rode our bikes or played tag up and down the streets. Still nothing really strange about it. Then one day, I, my brother, and 2 of the older boys in the neighborhood, 13 and 14, were walking down the train tracks in the woods that stretched behind all of our houses. We thought we could hear walking behind us, but everyone goes there to walk their dogs, so we didn't care. The footsteps kept getting louder and faster, until finally the oldest boy turns around and saw the guy jogging our direction. He told us to run down the path towards his backyard and tried to talk to the guy. The guy just kept jogging and didn't say anything. We all ran to the boy's house and told his parents. They called the police, and shortly after, 2 cops came by and talked to us and searched around the tracks. They said they didn't find anybody, but they saw some footprints that looked like an adult's that had been running in the other direction away from the houses. They said we did the right thing, and if anything weird happens, to tell the adults and call again. A week or so went by and we didn't see him. Until one day, I and my brother were playing in the backyard and I heard something in the woods. I looked over and I could see the guy in the bushes watching us. I screamed, and my stepdad came outside and the guy was gone. My stepdad called the police. They came and pretty much said the same thing as before. A few more days go by and nobody sees him. One afternoon, my stepdad took me and my brother into the woods to go play on a big rope swing that's been there forever. The rope swing is in the woods on the opposite side of the tracks from where our house is. We were playing there for a while and we heard footsteps walking down the tracks. They stopped close to the path to the rope swing, and then we heard rustling in the bushes. My stepdad grabbed me, told me very calmly and quietly to take my brother and go down a different path that led to the next street, run to the store that was close by, and wait there for him. I took my brother and made him walk in front of me. Just before we turned around the bend, I looked back just in time to see my stepdad walking towards the noise. He pulled something out of his jacket and gave it a flick. It was a big collapsible metal, billy club sort of thing. He kept walking and we ran to the store. We went inside and I got some ice cream for my brother and told Linda, the lady who worked there, what happened. She told us to go sit down and make a phone call. I thought she called the police, but now I'm not so sure. Thinking about it now, I think she called my stepdad. She talked for a few seconds and hung up. She looked very worried but relieved at the same time. She told us to just stay there and that everything is going to be alright. About an hour later, my stepdad came into the store. He hugged us, talked to Linda very quietly, then took us home. I asked him what happened and all he said was, "It's all good. Everything's fine now." No one has seen the guy since. A bit of a preface here. I was around 10 to 11 years old when this happened. Old enough to stay home alone, but not old enough to recognize some red flags. I attended camp over the summer, the typical 8 to 3 routine. My house sits close to the end of my street, which forms a U, but for some reason the bus driver would never drop me off at my house. I would always get dropped off at the end of my street, where I would toddle myself along back home. Both of my parents worked late hours, sometimes not getting home until 8 p.m., and it would be very expensive to hire a babysitter for 4 to 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. So starting 6th grade, when the bus dropped me off at home, I would be by myself. I'd do the usual middle school routine, play games online and watch TV. Occasionally, my neighbor's cat would come into my backyard and I would feed and pet her as a way to get outside. The only computer in the house was in my dad's workroom, which has a window overlooking the deck and a window overlooking the side of the house. We have large bay windows in the living room, dining room, and kitchen of my house, and since we sit on the hill, you can pretty much see the entire backyard from a nice vantage point. So most days when I got home, I would toss off my backpack and go right into that room, and you could see me walk from my front door and pop up by the computer from outside. Unfortunately, this would lead to something that I had forgotten up about until now. When I got off the bus, I did as expected, go into my dad's workroom and play computer games. About 30 minutes into this, I can hear faint meowing coming from the outside window. I paused the game and look outside, thinking maybe my neighbor's cat had wandered over. Nothing. Just sat back down and resumed playing, only to hear it again. It was quiet but noticeable, and so I checked the other window. Nothing again. This routine happened for a good 10 minutes, and eventually I got frustrated and went into the living room to watch TV. Not even 2 minutes later, meowing from the window I was sitting right beside. Now, I was very confused and a little creeped out, so I shut the blinds and kept trying to watch TV. It continued, but only when they came from the window right behind me did I jump and leave the living room, officially freaked out. I went into my bedroom where the blinds were down but still cracked for some sunlight. I tried to read a book, only to hear a meow come from outside my bedroom window. This was enough to make me call my dad, concerned that maybe the cat was hurt, but I couldn't see it to be sure. He said he would have the neighbor come check it out and call me back later. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes go by and I get a call from my dad saying he was coming home from work. There was nothing urgent in his voice, just that his job had gotten canceled and he could come home early. I thought nothing of it, and when he got home did I realize the cat noises had stopped. Fast forward to the present and I asked my dad about the strange incident, thinking it was funny the cat had followed me around. What he told me next made my blood run cold. After I called him, my neighbor did indeed come to check on the house. What he found were large footprints, leading in circles all around the house, clustered close to the walls so that even if I looked outside I wouldn't see anything. Somebody had been stalking me through my house, seeing where I was through the windows, and making cat noises to try and get me to come outside. He must have known I was home alone, since it was easy to see me walk by myself down the street and let myself in. My neighbor immediately called my dad and searched the property but found nobody. The police weren't called since there was nothing but footprints that led off into the woods and got lost, and I never saw anyone. My dad stayed home with me for the rest of the week. It sickens me to know that there are people who would use these tactics to try and lure kids out of their homes and, from there, do whatever they were planning. When I was 11, we, my single mom, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother, moved into a beautiful older craftsman-style house. I heard it was around 80 years old back then in 1984. Since after we moved in, we found that it was infested with cockroaches. I've never seen anything like this. You would turn on the lights at night and they would scatter from every surface. We had to store all of our food that wasn't canned in the fridge so they wouldn't get into it. We tried bug bombs and professional exterminators numerous times with no effect. Those things really can survive a nuclear war. Anyway, they weren't the reason we lived in the house less than a year before fleeing for our lives. I just thought it was an interesting side story. To this day, roaches are near the top of my most detested bugs list. I remember my mom discussing our next door neighbor's creepy son with my grandma. He was in his 20s or 30s. She had been doing dishes one day and looked up to see him standing directly on the other side of the kitchen window staring in at her. Normally, she would have kept something scary like this from us kids, but about that time, she told us to tell her if we ever saw him near the house and we weren't allowed to play outside. She also told us about a couple of times when she woke up to see him standing over her bed, and one time he put a cloth with chemicals over her face to knock her out. This is part of the story I know the least about, since she didn't tell us about it until years later. I think she might have thought she was dreaming, especially if he was drugging her. I don't know if anything else happened. I've never asked her about it in case something did, and it brought up bad memories. So one afternoon, we were all doing some spring cleaning when my brother said he found a cigarette butt in the upstairs toilet. Weird, since nobody in our family smokes. Being a dumb little 6-year-old, he flushed it before telling our mom. I still remember her trying to get the entire story out of him, being upset that the evidence was gone and thinking he might have been mistaken, or maybe he'd picked up a butt somewhere outside out of curiosity, and she soon dropped it and we mostly forgot about it. I think it was a few weeks later and my brother was spending the night at our grandparents and my sister, and I were the only ones upstairs. Our mom's bedroom was downstairs. My sister heard a sound like a screen door slamming, but she insisted it came from in the house. She was freaked out. I told her it was just from outside and to go to sleep. A minute later, we heard a strangled cough coming from just outside our bedroom door. A man's cough, and it sounded like he was trying to keep from making noise. I whispered that we needed to get downstairs. We sneaked out of the room and I had the irrational urge to turn on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the hall from our bedroom, and check to see if anybody was there. Then, just as strong of a feeling to get away from the bathroom and get downstairs now. The scariest moment of my life was when we were creeping down the stairs in the pitch black. It was a spiral enclosed stairway with walls, the perfect place for somebody to hide. The stairway light was burned out and the wood steps were creaky, so it was terrifying making our way down. We got downstairs and woke up our mom, panicked that there was a guy upstairs in our bathroom. She started to tell us to go back to bed, but could see we were seriously scared. She went over to the bottom of the stairway to go up and show us that there was nothing to be scared about, and then she had just as strong a feeling to close the stairway door and to lock it now. She did. Called the cops and they found nothing and didn't really take us very serious. The next day, she called the police department detective friend of hers from high school to come over and inspect the house. Remembering the cigarette butt in the toilet, she had him look at the upstairs bathroom window. It was a high, narrow, rectangular window, but not very big, just wide enough for a person. Who knows how many times the intruder climbed our roof to get in and was upstairs while we were sleeping across the hall. The window swung up on hinges. When my mom's friend let the window drop, it sounded like a screen door slamming. He said the locks on all the windows were so old, they were practically useless and we needed to get out of the house immediately. We moved into my grandparents' house that day. When my mom went with her brothers a few days later to pack up some things, a back door had been smashed open, but nothing in the house was disturbed. I've edited to clarify why it seemed like my mom was in denial about the guy going into her room. I'm honestly not clear on the details since she never told us much about what she saw. I think she might have been out of it because of the chloroform and probably thought she was imagining it. The puzzle pieces came into place after the detective checked out her house and confirmed somebody was breaking in. As soon as she knew we were in real danger, she got us out immediately. A few years later, we heard the neighbor's son was arrested for rape and attempted murder. I still wonder what might have happened if I had turned on that bathroom light, if my mom didn't lock the stairway door, or if we didn't leave the house when we did. I also wonder if it's still infested with cockroaches or not. One night, I decided to take a taxi back home from hanging out with my best friend and her new boyfriend. I ordered the car and both of them waited until I got in and waved goodbye. As always, I found myself sitting in the back of the car right behind the driver. I knew it was going to be a long ride, so I was happy when my driver, who was probably in his 30s, finally started a conversation. He asked the basic questions like, "How are you and how was your night?" He already knew my name since it showed up on his display, but then he continued to talk, asking for my age and if the address I was going to was my home. I honestly didn't think much of it, just thought he was trying to keep the conversation alive since he seemed to be a friendly person. After we'd been driving for a while, he said, "You can sit in the front if you want to." Alright, I thought. The only problem was we were in the middle of the highway, so I let him know that I was fine sitting in the back. All of a sudden, he pushed the brakes, mind you. We were still in the middle of the highway, and demanded that I switch seats. But instead of opening the door to get out, he insisted that I crawl over the middle console. Something about this situation scared me and I got seriously creepy vibes from this guy. I didn't want to make him mad because the last thing I needed was an insane taxi driver that eventually loses his shit, and who only knows what this could have triggered in him. So I couldn't help myself and quickly changed seats. Regardless, the other options would have been to escape into the woods or get run over by multiple cars. Once I got in the front, I could see his face. He locked eyes with me for a sharp second, and I noticed a bright, almost toothless smile, and the smell of rotten teeth and alcohol punched me in the face. However, thankfully he continued to drive on the right route and pulled up his Facebook profile to show me his 3 children. He then proceeded to type in my name on Facebook, and found me right away. He shoved his phone into my face with the words, "That's you, right?" We were almost at my house, and in my mind I was going to give him his money and then run. Right before we entered my street, our conversation went like this. "Sometimes girls offer to pay me with natural resources." "Like what?" I said. "A blowjob, but I don't mind because I'm single." "Can you drop me off here, please?" I said. "Sure, and I'll walk you home. You must be scared of the refugees." I felt how my body completely independently started to open the door and run as fast as possible. That was one of my creepiest moments in life, I'd say, so let's not meet again, creepy taxi driver. Since he added himself on Facebook that night, I was able to report him and message his wife because guess what? He was not single whatsoever. Let me start by saying that at the time this began, about 3 months ago, my wife and I, along with our 3 children, had been living in this apartment for about 3 months. We are very quiet people, just a lesbian couple with some kids, and because we live in the Bible Belt, people tend to give us sort of a white berth. Both my wife and I also tend to give off a "do not screw with us" vibe due to past experiences, and most of the time people don't. So we've been living in a nice townhouse apartment in a nice quiet area of our city, which itself is smallish, minding our own business and going about our lives. I usually got home at about 7 to 8 p.m. at this point, and my wife and I would spend time together with our 2 youngest kids, teenagers, until their 9:30 p.m. bedtime. At about 10:30 p.m., my wife would leave the apartment to go and get her oldest son from work, and I would settle in for bed myself as I got up very early for work. This had been our routine for about 3 months, and we were all pretty settled into it. So one evening, I'm lying there in bed, checking my emails as I try to wind down enough to get to sleep. The light in my second floor bedroom, which is visible from the street or front of our building, is off. Directly below me, right next to our front door, is our first floor bathroom. Weird design, but whatever, where the light is off. The kids are asleep. The dogs, 2 of them, are snoozing at the foot of the bed, and I'm quickly approaching sleep myself. The house is quiet and clearly closed up for the night. My car is in our spot, right in the front, also locked up. Somewhat distractedly, I hear a loud broken-sounding car pull into our parking lot, but I don't pay a lot of attention to it. I know what my wife's car sounds like, and this isn't it. I figure it's one of our neighbors or their guests. A few minutes later, I heard the tapping. It was a very distinctive sound, the sound of fingernails tapping against glass. Immediately, I felt the chill go up my spine. It's the middle of the night. Why would somebody be tapping on a window at this time? I lay quiet for a moment, waiting for someone to look out their door and go, "Dude, wrong house," or something. But that didn't happen. Instead, the tapping continued. It would go on for a few minutes, stop for a minute or two, and resume. It was directly below my bedroom, and I could hear it very clearly. Somebody was tapping on our bathroom window. Here's where I was stupid. I would love to say that I called the police and some creeper was arrested, but that's not what happened. Instead, I texted my wife. It went something like, "Please tell me you got back early and you're tapping on the window because you suck at jokes." She texted back immediately with something like, "No, I'm on my way right now." At this point, I'm seriously creeped out. I flipped on the bedroom light, hoping that it would scare the tapper off, but no dice. It continued. Finally, I slipped out of bed, grabbed the baseball bat from the closet, and crept down the stairs. Again, I don't know why I didn't call the cops. I remember being worried about scaring the kids or overreacting. I didn't want one of the city cops that I work with laughing at me because there was a squirrel at my window or something. So I was handling this myself. The downstairs is still completely dark and silent except for the tapping, and I was careful not to make any noise. I slipped right up to the front door and very quietly turned the deadbolt. It wasn't locked previously because I knew my wife would be coming back and didn't want to inconvenience her. After this, I peeped through our blinds and nothing. Nobody was on the porch. Confused and still freaked out, I went back upstairs. As soon as I turned out the light, the tapping started again. This time I flipped a little bit. I turned the light back on and called my wife, sort of panicked, still listening to the steady tapping from the window downstairs. She has a cooler head than I do and told me she was hanging up to call the police. For the 20 or so minutes that it took her to get home, I was huddled on the bed clutching my dachshund. Useless beast that she is, clearly, lol, and listening to this tapping. It stopped 5 or 6 minutes before she arrived, and I heard the sound of that very loud broken-sounding car again. The police arrived a minute or so after my wife and took a report. The cop, who I knew, chastened me thoroughly for not calling them first, right when it started. My wife did the same. They didn't think I was overreacting one bit, and there was evidence that somebody had been there. The dirt in our front garden was disturbed, and some plants were crushed, and the bench that usually sits in front of our window had been moved out away from the front of the house. I was embarrassed but relieved. The cops said they would make sure there was a patrol in the area to keep an eye on things. For the next several nights, there was a police car rolling down my street right about the time my wife left to pick up our son and then coming back at about 15-minute intervals from there on out. Problem solved, right? Well, not so much. About 2 weeks later, after the patrols had ceased, I was lying in my bed on my way to falling asleep. Probably around 10:45 again. I know my wife won't be home until 11:30 at least, just because of my kids' work schedule and the drive home. Just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear the same tapping. This time I sat bolt upright in bed, listened for a second to make sure I wasn't creeping myself out, and called the cops. They arrived about 15 minutes later. The tapping stopped about 5 minutes previous. Again, there were signs that somebody had been in front of our house. They took a report and began patrols again. I was freaked out but tried not to be worried. Our neighborhood was good, a nice quiet place to live. We talked to several of our neighbors. We lived in a row of townhouses and all agreed to keep an eye out for one another. After about 3 weeks, I figured the problem was resolved. There had been no more instances of window tapping or any other creepy activity around the apartment. It seemed like it had just been a weird, distressing prank and that whoever it was over it. We were still making sure we were cautious, keeping our deadbolt locked, walking the dogs at night, together instead of alone, checking to make sure the cars were locked. But there was no reason to continue to really worry about it. So that night, about 3 weeks later, I was working late. I had a lot of paperwork to do and I just wanted to knock it out. So at about 9 p.m. I was still there. Everyone else in my building was gone and had been for the better of an hour. It was just me. That was totally fine by me. I had locked myself in, set the security alarm, and turned off the unnecessary lights in the office. I wasn't worried one bit as I had done this many times before with no problems. I felt completely safe. I was also about 40 minutes from home. That was the length of my daily commute at the time. I'm not sure what time it was exactly, somewhere between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock p.m. I'm hanging out in my office, tapping away on my computer, my back to the floor to ceiling windows behind me. They don't open and have blinds as well as curtains, but you can see the windows themselves from our front parking lot. At that point, I hardly noticed the windows. I had decorated them when I first set up my office, put down the blinds, and promptly forgot about them. At least until I heard the tapping. It was the same sound, fingernails against glass, and this time it was directly behind me. Needless to say, I flipped a little bit. I almost turned over my desk chair, getting out of the office, and called the police from one of the interior offices, with no windows. The entire time I'm waiting, which is about 10 minutes, I'm hearing this tapping. It wasn't in just one area, but moved around the windows in the front of our building, and it echoed in the empty halls, and it was generally creepy as heck. When the police arrived, they told me it was okay to come out, and I met them at the front door, which was still locked, the security system still armed. They checked the perimeter of the building, the back door, and the other offices. But there was nobody there, just disturbed plants and dirt in the garden that runs along our building's front and smudges on the glass. They waited while I locked back up, walked me to my car, and then followed me out of the parking lot until I hit the interstate. After that, everything seemed to stop. There have been no more instances of window tapping, either at home or at my office. Last week, for unrelated reasons, we moved to a new house much closer to my work and in another city entirely. I've gone back to sometimes working late, but I also asked for my office to be moved to the back of the building, on the second story where my windows aren't accessible at all. So far everything is quiet and I'm hoping it stays that way. Window tapper, whoever you are, let's not meet again. My husband and I lived in a small 2-floor house with 2 main entrances, one along the front and the other on the side of the house, which opens up into the laundry room. When we are too busy or it's too late to walk our dog, we hook his collar onto a long line that's attached to one of the pipes on the corner of our house so he can use the bathroom. We used to do this from the door in our laundry room, but we'd noticed the large step from the door to the ground had been taking a toll on his hips. As a result, we started letting him out through the front door instead, since the porch is much closer to the ground. This particular night, I was home alone with my dog, and it was around midnight when I decided to let him outside one last time before going to sleep. I hook him up on his line, close the door and lock it before heading into the kitchen to put away the dishes. This was pretty routine. Even if he used the bathroom quickly, he liked to walk around along the front and inside of the house for a few minutes before coming back inside. As I'm putting away the dishes, I hear a scratch on the door. How my dog signals he wants to come inside, so I head over to let him back in. Since I've watched way too many scary movies, I always look through the door's peephole before opening it. Out of habit, I look to check that my dog is in front of the door. Instead, I see a man staring very intently at the door handle. I freeze with my hand on the door handle. I don't know how much time went by, but then I heard another scratch, this one louder than the first. This kind of wakes me up from my initial shock, and I run to grab my cell phone. I call my husband to tell him what's happening. He was very confused. I probably wasn't explaining the situation very well, but he says that he's heading home. This is when I realize my dog is still outside with the person. I head back to the front door trying to make as little noise as possible, to check whether the stranger is still there. Just like before, he's standing there, head bowed looking at the doorknob. I tiptoe over to the laundry room and slowly open the door as quietly as I can. I can't see my dog anywhere and the side of my house is covered in gravel. I knew I couldn't step outside without making a lot of noise. With my heart still pounding in my chest, I go to the front door to keep an eye on the stranger and to get a better look at him. I considered calling the police, but I didn't feel they would take me seriously, since all this man was doing was standing in front of my house. I tried taking a picture of him with my cell phone, but my camera was only able to take pictures of the people and not the images behind the glass. All of a sudden, the man looks up directly at me. I swear he knew I was there. He glares at me, then opens his mouth to show a taunting, malicious grin. He stood there that way for a few seconds. With that, he turns around and starts to walk down the street. I stay in the same place, almost expecting him to rush back and start pounding on the door. Luckily, my husband got back after a few minutes. Long story short, he convinced me to call the police, and we went out looking for my dog. It turns out this man had cut the end of the line connected to the pipe, and our dog decided this was a good time for him to explore my neighbor's backyard, which was where we found him. It's been 3 years since this happened. We've since moved to a new house, unrelated reasons, and the police weren't able to come up with any suspects. Ever since then, we take our dog on very long walks before the sun goes down. This happened yesterday and I honestly don't think I've fully processed it. Me, female 19, and my friend, female 19. We're biking home at around 3 a.m. on a dimly lit street right next to our house. One side was forest, pitch black beyond the tree line, and on the other side was a bunch of houses. From far away, we spotted a red car with one broken headlight parked ahead. As soon as we got closer, the car started moving, passed us very slowly, then made a U-turn, and drove past us again. Even in the dark, it was obvious we were two girls alone at night, so it put some space between us and them. As soon as we got to the sidewalk, we noticed a girl standing partially hidden behind a white truck, watching that same red car. The car was creeping towards her. Then she ran off, running up the sidewalk and turning into a bike path that cuts through the forest. Immediately, two men got out of the car and followed her in, so we decided to follow and try to help that girl. Survival instincts hadn't kicked in yet. I live next to the forest. I know how dark it gets. Nobody walks that path without a flashlight unless they have a reason, and even then it was 3 a.m. The slow footsteps, the bucket hat guy, the way the car disappeared. It all just felt wrong. We reached the path entrance and saw the red car just waiting there. The driver, a guy in a white bucket hat, looked straight at us, then sped away far into the street. The path was pitch black. We walked in, a fence on one side and dense forest on the other. That's when I noticed slow, deliberate footsteps keeping pace with us. Definitely not an animal and heavy enough to be a person. We kept walking on until my friend spotted the girl ahead of us. She shone her flashlight and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" The girl looked over her shoulder, stared for a moment with this unreadable, creepy expression, and then took off running deeper into the darkness. At that point, our survival instincts finally kicked in. We turned and sprinted back the way we came, screaming as we ran. We called the police as soon as we got back to the street. Within minutes, 3 police cars arrived and they asked questions, and one ghost car drove down the forest path. About 5 minutes later, they returned and showed us a photo of the girl. The cops said they found her with one man, which made no sense because less than 10 minutes earlier, we'd seen her completely alone and running away. They also said neither of them would identify themselves or explain why they were there. They brushed us off, saying we could go home now. As we walked away, we saw 3 people get into a police car, which made it even weirder because earlier they said there was only one guy with her. So was there really somebody following us in the woods? I keep thinking, what if this was a trafficking bait? Or maybe the only reason they didn't go after us was because we started screaming. Either way, I can't stop replaying it in my head. This just happened a few days ago and I'm extremely shaken up. I live on the 2nd floor of a 3-level apartment. We have a crawl space that connects all the apartments. We aren't sure why it's there, but we all have stuff in it and none of us would ever even attempt to go inside of it, so we still felt pretty safe. The other night the sun was setting, but it wasn't pitch black out or anything yet. I'm walking through my living room when I see a short woman on my fire escape looking into my window. This is extremely bizarre considering it's still semi-light out and she had to literally get onto our fire escape somehow. We have 2 windows that the fire escape reaches, and she was looking in both but didn't see me. I crawled onto the ground and my heart was racing as I watched her try to open the windows. I didn't know what the heck to do because my phone was in the other room. After what seemed like an eternity, she finally left. I went into my room to get my phone to text my landlord and call the cops. I came back into the living room and was looking out the windows to see if I could locate her, when all of a sudden I heard a weird noise coming from the ceiling. We have one of those little tile ceilings made out of separate slabs of cork/wood. I look up to see one of the slabs lifted up and 2 eyes staring at me. I have no clue how she got into the crawl space so quickly, but I grabbed the nearest thing next to me, which was a broom, and started hitting her with it through the ceiling and called the cops as soon as she crawled away. They showed up and searched the place and didn't find her until a few days later when she was on someone else's fire escape. The cops said she was definitely on some hard drugs and that she was violent towards them. I'm glad she's gone, but whoever that crazy lady that came through my ceiling was, let's not meet again. It was a Sunday early in the morning. I live in the suburbs, but my parents own a farm that I enjoy going to because I get to see my dog. Her name is Molly. She's a mutt, but she's not a tiny dog by any means. At that time, I felt very safe around her and would often take her for walks in a forest that was nearby. The day started off like any other. I and my dad got in the car, drove around for a while, and arrived at the farm. I immediately got out of the car and hugged Molly. My parents always got angry when I hugged her since I'd smell like her for the rest of the day. I put her leash on and asked my dad if I could take her for a walk. He always thought we would just go down a road and back, but I always found it more interesting to take her to the forest. I always felt a certain kind of peace and relaxation there that was unmatched by anything else. So we took a turn and headed to the forest. Usually when we got there, I would take her leash off so she could explore on her own. Most of the time, I'd carve my name into the trees or look for anything interesting. I was playing baseball with some rocks and a wooden leg, presumably from an old table, and then I heard it. Molly was barking at something. This wasn't usual when we were in the forest. I thought it was a fox or some other animal, so I quickly grabbed the wooden leg like a weapon. I knew that if it was a fox, I wouldn't attack it, but I had a sense of security while I was holding it. I called out, "Molly," but she kept barking. This was very strange for me since she always came to me when I called her. I followed the sound of her barks and stumbled across a scene I'll never forget. There was a man probably in his late 50s, half naked, carrying a large machete in one hand and holding moonshine in the other. This was the first time that I stumbled across somebody in the woods, let alone someone half naked and carrying a big ass machete. He was completely ignoring Molly and hacking away at the ground for some reason. I didn't really know how to handle this situation. Even now, I have no idea how I would handle it. "Sir, are you alright?" I asked in confusion. I don't think I understood the seriousness of the situation at the time. He turned around, revealing his face. He had some of the clearest blue eyes I've ever seen to this day. I could see them so well because they were open wide. "Come here, boy. Look what I've dug up." I was afraid that if I didn't listen to him, he would start chasing after me, and that was something I wanted to avoid at all costs. I got closer but kept a good distance. I didn't see anything except for an empty hole. He returned to hitting the ground with his machete, occasionally taking sips from the bottle. I used this window of time to get my dog and started walking away slowly so as to not notify him that I was leaving. But then I took one final glance at the man. His head was dug deep in the hole. I was intrigued, so I kept looking. I know how stupid of me. He finally got up from the ground. I was shocked when I saw him carrying a bone in his mouth. I have no idea what animal it belonged to, if it even did belong to an animal. I had seen enough and started sprinting with my dog. As we ran, I heard him laughing, and then I saw something flying from the corner of my eye. It was that damn machete. I heard him yell, "Dang it." This made me run even faster. I know the forest very well, so I wasn't afraid of getting lost. I ripped through branches and bushes until I got out of that forest, but I didn't stop sprinting until I arrived at the garage where my father was testing out lights on our tractor. I didn't tell him a single thing about the man, since I was afraid that he would get angry and wouldn't allow me to walk Molly anymore. Needless to say, I never went to that forest alone ever again. This happened when I was in college. I lived in Isla Vista, the student community at UCSB, notorious for being a party school. It lived up to its reputation. I liked to party, but dude, these people were off the wall. As such, there were a lot of people who put themselves in dangerous situations, drinking to excess and not being careful, not locking doors and stuff like that. It had a very isolated and insular vibe, and anybody who was hanging around who wasn't college aged immediately looked out of place and strange. One night after having a few drinks, I came home to my small house, where I lived with two other girls probably around 2:30 a.m. We were all serious students. I was probably the least serious actually, and when we partied, it was not your typical UCSB mega rager, more like a small get-together with friends. We would often have a few people spend the night, sleeping on our furniture or in our beds, as the case may be. That night, my roommates had had a few people over who I didn't know, and I saw when I returned home that one of them had opted to sleep on the couch from the shadow that I saw there. I didn't turn the light so I wouldn't wake anyone up, but as I was passing the couch to enter my bedroom, I noticed that the figure was lying very stiff. He just had this weird energy to him. He was lying down, but it was like he was putting all of his energy into lying as still and rigid as possible. I paused, and the guy quickly jerked his head to face me, without moving his limbs so quickly that it startled me. I could see his wide eyes glinting in the dark. Figuring that I'd startled him, or that he was drunk or maybe on some kind of stimulant and unable to sleep, I just hurried past into my bedroom and locked the door. The dude made me nervous, and I wasn't taking any chances. I fell asleep. At 4:30 a.m. I woke up, and there was a strange sound at the door, almost like somebody was drumming their fingers against the wood very quietly. I lay there still and listened. There were more quiet sounds like somebody scratching the door with their fingers, which got louder and louder until it was clear that he was using both hands and scratching as fast and hard as possible. It created an extremely loud and intimidating sound that filled me with fear. I got my cell phone and texted my roommate because I was afraid to make a sound. "Your friend is freaking me out. Is he coked out? Can you talk to him, please? He's banging and scratching on my door." She didn't text me back, probably because she was asleep. I texted my other roommate to the same effect, covering all my bases. Keep in mind that the scratching has been going on at this point for a couple of minutes, and I have no idea how he could have sustained it, as scratching a wooden door with your fingernails can't feel good. He also grabbed at the knob and jiggled it super forcefully. Since neither of them answered, I decided to call and really wake them up, though I was scared to make a sound. I know it sounds stupid, but there was something seriously horrifying about being teased like this through the door. I knew that he was trying to terrify me. I felt like a little kid, but I could tell this guy was screwed up or something, and maybe the police needed to be called, and I wanted to loop my roommates in since it was one of their friends. The scratching stopped abruptly, and I called my roommate, who answered sleepily. "Yo, your friend is messed up. Can you please deal with it? Do we need to call the cops? He's seriously scaring me, and he was scratching at my bedroom door. It's really freaking weird." She didn't say anything for several seconds, and when she did speak, her voice had no sleepiness in it at all. "What friend?" she said. "That guy that was sleeping on the couch," I said. She was quiet again. "We didn't have any guys over," she said. "Call the police." My adrenaline surged, and I told her to please lock the bedroom door as quickly as possible. I realized that I hadn't heard scratching in a while, and I had no clue where the dude had gone. Suddenly, I heard a loud banging at the other end of the house, where my roommates, Lauren and Monica, shared a bedroom. The bangs were followed by the sound of them screaming in fear. I quickly dialed the police as this maniac proceeded to bang against the luckily locked bedroom door of my two roommates as they screamed. The heaviness of the blows left no doubt that he was trying to break the door down. I told the 911 operator the situation, and she dispatched 2 squad cars. The police in East La Vista are generally used to peeling drunks off the sidewalk and breaking up brawling frat bros. This was really serious and strange, and I think the dispatcher got the sense from my tone how terrified I was, and she stayed on the phone with me. At one point the banging stopped and everything was quiet for a while. I talked with the dispatcher and suddenly looked down to see that this guy had slipped his fingers through the 1-inch gap between my door and the floor and was just kind of waggling them around, making this weird growling sound. I screamed and backed away, which is my biggest regret about the situation, since when I look back, it would have been so awesome to just stomp the heck out of those fingers and hear the guy howl in pain. When the cops rolled up, I heard running and the sound of our sliding glass door opening and closing. Then he was gone. The cops never caught him. He had broken in through our side door by jimmying the lock somehow. My door was covered in what turned out to be huge gauges he made using a pair of scissors, which he discarded on the ground before he left. What terrifies me most about this was that I walked right past him. I looked him right in the face. I realize now that he was not trying to sleep or on drugs, but was lying so stiff like that because he was hiding. He probably heard me open the door and freaked out because he hadn't realized there was another girl living there. He tried to blend into the couch into the darkness. I was on the train coming back from meeting a friend. I was reading a book on occult magic, and this older guy sat next to me and said, "What's that you're reading?" "I do magic too," and started chatting to me about all sorts. Occult areas in our town, Illuminati conspiracies, he was saying. "I can tell you're a magic. I sensed it as I sat by you. I knew as soon as I boarded." He sounded really interesting with the things he was talking about. I felt really flattered and pleased with myself. I had been feeling lonely and down, and I felt really proud of my power of attracting an interesting friend to chat to on the train who knew about occult stuff. I know it sounds seductive and creepy now, but he didn't seem creepy at all. He just seemed like a really intelligent, educated professor who was enthusiastic about magic and occult stuff, and to share his knowledge with someone. He seemed really wise-sounding and spiritual, like a church pastor or something like that on TV. I just thought all my magic reading had manifested a new friend to chat to about stuff, so I agreed to meet him for coffee in the week. Also, he told me that he worked at the refugee center, and I told him I had applied for the job there, and he promised to get me if I chatted with him. Anyways, I met him and I wasn't really sure how to feel about it. He told me he was gay and used to be a guy prostitute. He was really flirty and creepy with me. He got me to walk to his house with him as he had forgotten his wallet. His house was covered in letters from the local mental hospital, which I recognized as a friend gets them too, about meds and appointments, letters all over the floor and chairs. He had a picture of himself with blue scribbled around it, and he said, "You're psychic. You can see the blue psychic color." And he kept going on about my aura and giggling crazily and jumping up and down, waving around a dowsing stick that was a snapped off old aerial. Also, he had found a brand of liquor with his surname, and he bought loads of bottles of it and said that his Illuminati family made the drink and were millionaires but had casted him out. And he kept telling loads of stories about how he teaches psychic skills to the king of Saudi Arabia and how he was hiding and used to live in a castle in France with the Illuminati, etc. And he was saying, "I'm your messiah now. You need me to develop your skills. When I bring you back here, I'll take you upstairs and we can begin." Saying things like, "I need to know everything about you." I was scared and made an excuse and got away from him. And he was sad and crying. "I wanted to take you out for dinner and drinks tonight. I'm lonely." I was too scared and guilty to say I didn't want to see him again, so I just said, "I've got to go." He texted me that night with a list of philosophy books I needed to read to start my learning. He didn't know anything about magic. He couldn't say more to me than just repeating, "I'm magic, but I can't tell you more until we begin training." He was really mentally ill. He kept talking for half a sentence, then giggling and forgetting what he was saying, trailing off all the time and muttering. I felt so dumb and disappointed. I know it sounds like I'm naive, but he was so different when I met him. He just seemed like a calm, wise old professor who wanted to chat with somebody about occult stuff. And he was saying on the train that he does work at the refugee center because he knows so much about Islam and they all respect him. He sounded so clever and calm. This is a story about a man named John, who I met while working retail. John is an older white man in his mid-50s, well-dressed, well-spoken with shoulder-length steel gray hair and a low ponytail tied back. At the time, I was working at a farm and pet supply store. I was called over to help a customer look at electric fences and shock collars for dogs, which I am steadfastly against, but I had to help this customer. I asked him what I could help him with, and he said he was interested in an electric fence for his dogs, since he had a cabin in the woods and wanted to make sure they didn't get away. He said, "Oh yes, I'm looking to use the shock collar. Maybe on you." Thoroughly creeped out, I tried to laugh it off and tell him no thank you. I finally got him somebody who knew more than I did and thought it would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. The next time that he saw me, he said, "I've been looking for you. I bought what I wanted. I wanted to slap you the next time I saw you." I told him if he ever hit me, I'd absolutely hit him back. So then a few days later, he told me he would really like to take me out to lunch one day, and I politely declined. He would come right into the store and look for me. I'd see him before he saw me. One day I saw him first. I had until I thought he left, but no. He found me back in my department. He said, "Just so you know, I'm not dressed up for you today. I have a meeting with the bank, but if I didn't, I would be taking you out for lunch. You know, I can tell you dyed your hair, and you look so beautiful, but that doesn't mean anything to you, does it? It might mean something if you liked me back." He was never banned from the store, even after one of my managers heard him say these things to me, but my coworkers would tell me when he was in the store and help me get away from him until he left. I haven't seen him since I quit, and I am so thankful. I grew up in the countryside, right next to a national park frequently visited by nature lovers and bird enthusiasts. It was the kind of park where you are not really allowed to bike or ride horses, only walk or run. But 10-year-old me felt it was a stupid rule and did so anyway because the trails were perfect for it. I knew fully well that I wasn't supposed to do that, and I was caught a few times, but nothing came of it apart from a half-hearted, "Don't do it again," and I did, of course, until one day something frightening happened that made me stop. My family were horse breeders, and I would often take one of the horses for a ride, usually in the forbidden park. This day, very early in the morning, the first day of the summer holiday, it was beautiful outdoors, misty and foggy, yet a sky that promised a sunny day ahead. Since it was so early before 6 o'clock, I knew there wouldn't be anyone on the trail to see me, so I let the horse set off full speed along the trail. I only slowed down on the part of the trail that got steep on one side, leading down to the river, because the thought of one step too close to the edge was too much even for a kid with next to non-existing risk assessment skills. Suddenly the horse came to a halt and refused to take another step. I grew up with horses all of my life and knew that usually indicates that you need to investigate. Is there something with the hooves? Did the horse spot something that spooked it? The hooves were fine, but the horse didn't move an inch. That's when I saw it. Somebody had set up a trap, a thin sharp metal wire across the trail, in perfect neck height for an adult. I stopped and looked around but didn't see anyone. The wire was well attached to 2 trees and impossible for me to remove, so I led the horse around it, and to do so, I had to walk a bit up into the wooded area on the side of the trail. That is when I heard this singing. The lyrics were something along the lines of, "Hey, all you runners, come here passing. Let the lifeblood pour out." I, as silently as I could and with my heart in my throat, backed away, got up on the horse and hurried back the way I came as fast as I could. I knew I had to tell somebody about it, but at the same time, I wanted to avoid admitting to riding a huge and very forbidden horse on those protected trails. So now I had a problem. The old stories about a mad old man living in the shed in the woods. A shed that was once a cottage for the local hunter came back to me as I hung on the horse for dear life. I got up and told my brother what had happened, and he went back there with me in tow. We found the wire trap, and after a while of searching, we also find a spear-like pole on the ground, right on the spot where you land if you come running and jumped over the fallen tree on the trail. That's when we called the police. The area was searched and several similar traps were found, but no sight of the old man. The following summer, though, there was big news in the local paper about spear-like poles being found right under the water surface, directly under that little tower that you're supposed to dive from at the lake. And black garbage bags filled with rocks were found on the narrow bridge crossing the river, so if a car had hit it, the risk is it would have gone off the road and into the water. This happened a while ago, so my recollection of this isn't going to be word for word, but here we go. I'm a teenager. My mom and I live alone. We live basically in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town is a little less than an hour away, and the only things we have near us are a gas station and a bar. I know everybody who lives near me, and we rarely ever see new people in our neck of the woods, so just seeing somebody who isn't familiar is suspicious enough, so this was pretty creepy. A couple years ago, it was the middle of the night. My mom and I are night owls. We like to be awake from that midnight to 6 a.m. time period that most people prefer to sleep during. My mother was watching TV in the living room, and I was using the computer in the kitchen. The kitchen and the living room are basically connected, so I wasn't too far away from her, only a few feet. The front door leads right into the living room. It's a door with 9 windows, so it's pretty easy to see in. My mom looked towards the door and she saw somebody staring at her through the window, and he was wearing a hood that obscured almost all of his face. My mom jumped, and she of course walked to the door and asked him what the heck he was doing. According to my mom, he looked pretty young, but she could barely see his face, so who knows how old he was. The man said something along the lines of, could you help me with my car, please? In a tone that I could only describe as miserable and off-putting. Even though it was dark out, there should have been enough light for her to see a car. There was no car. The man was also holding his hands in his pockets pretty tight. My mom said no and apologized. This caused him to grip whatever it was in his pockets tighter, so tight it caused his arms to tremble. He stayed for a few more minutes, and then he had swiftly disappeared. Throughout the night, maybe 1 or 2 hours later, we thought we'd heard slight weeping, but we didn't see anyone at any of the doors and windows. I may be making assumptions here, but I can only assume it was a weapon. He was holding it in his pockets. This was a creepy as heck experience, and it's safe to say that he was going to lure my mom out of the house to do something sinister. A year ago, there was a very small metal plate jammed between the front door, strike plate, and the piece that goes inside of it. I'm not sure what it's called. We have zero idea where this metal plate came from, but the metal plate stopped our doors from locking, so I'm assuming it was put there so that somebody could get in later. These things are probably not related, but it made me think about him, because this was deliberately placed there by somebody and we are not sure why. In the summer of 2006, I lived abroad with my parents, but my extended family lived in Pakistan. We hadn't gone back to Pakistan in a few years, so that summer we decided to go back for a bit during the summer vacation. I was around 7 years old at the time. Pakistan's a third world country, and even though I was born there, for most of my life I've been raised abroad, so I did have a morsel of fear when going back, even for just a summer. Pakistan at the time also suffered from a lot of security issues, so despite just being a kid, seeing the news be regurgitated did stick a sense of danger within me, even though I never expected anything would happen. What made matters worse was that our arrival into Pakistan was extremely late at night, between 2 to 3 a.m., which made the trip back home from the airport that much more dangerous. Anyways, my family arrived at the airport and we had a rather sketchy uncle of mine pick us up. He and his kids were living along with my grandparents at the time. We got in the car and went on our way, and while it was extremely dark and late at night, I didn't notice anything too out of the ordinary, except the fact that there was a car that was tailing behind us as we made our way home. I was extremely sleepy though, so I may just be imagining it. I thought at that moment, but it genuinely felt like I was seeing the same car for far too long. My parents were too focused on talking and rekindling with my uncle, but I kept looking back at the car and wondered if it really was the same car or just a different one that happened to look similar. Eventually, we arrived home. I looked back from the back windshield and it looked like there was nobody there. My uncle called my grandfather to open the gates. It was a rather large mansion-like house with a gate at the front through which cars can enter. My grandpa was taking a long time to open the gates, and while I was waiting, I noticed a bright light coming from behind our car. Another car had arrived behind us in the lane that led to the house. No other car would have any business there this late at night. The brightness of the headlight of the car behind us is something I still remember to this day. I tried to look back and see in the darkness. Before I could realize that it was indeed the same car, two men got out of the car and began approaching our vehicle. They were armed. They began knocking on our car's windows and made it very clear that they had guns with them. They took my mom's purse, which had most of the jewelry that she had brought with her, as well as some other food items and gifts we had with us. My parents and uncle showed no resistance. The entire time I was sitting in the car in shock. Unsure of what was happening and if I should have spoken earlier about the car, I was scared out of my mind. While this was happening, my grandpa finally opened the door and the burglars ran back to their vehicle with the things they took, and I never saw them again. My family submitted a police report the following day, but we were mostly just glad we were all in good shape after that, albeit a bit traumatized. As I said before, my uncle is kind of shady. My mom has a theory that he planned all of this, but I doubt it personally. But I guess you never know. The funny thing is, when we came back to Pakistan for vacations once again a few years later, my father insisted for us to stay inside the airport all night long so that something similar couldn't happen. Our flight arrived again at night and he made us stay nearly 4 to 5 hours at the airport until it was morning outside before we even took a step out of the airport.